Hello, everybody, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. I'm Nikolai Barca, the Kauai representative on the state's Game Management Advisory Commission, otherwise known as the GMAC. And my presentation hopefully makes a good case for the need for more shelters for us to camp at while we're hunting in remote parts of Kauai and perhaps the other islands too. This is a presentation which I gave to the GMAC in February of 2024 with slight variations. If you want to see the original, it's somewhere online, but let's jump into it. So a little about me. I grew up hunting, fishing, camping, often in remote areas. I like to call myself a backcountry hunter. It was a great way to grow up, and I just want the next generation to have those same opportunities and more. For the last 18 years, I've worked professionally deep in the mountains of Kauai in watershed conservation and ecological monitoring, and I applied to become the GMAC rep around 4 years ago. So Kauai, we have a vibrant hunting culture. Pigs are found throughout the island. We also have black-tailed deer. For those who don't know, the state introduced the deer in the 1960s to West Kauai. We're the only island with black-tailed deer. We do not have axis deer, and they're still spreading, and they're just reaching some backcountry parts of the Alakai, forming good numbers, which are proving a new and unique draw to hunters. They've traditionally been a real challenge to hunt with very low success rates. And so Kauai hunters still have a love of goat hunting, which are a lot more plentiful, and a lot of people really enjoy goat hunting on Kauai. And I grew up goat hunting too. Kauai and the rest of Hawaii has a forest reserve system, which was developed over a century ago. So on the map, that's the green. And it's both public and private lands, but the public lands tend to be public hunting units outlined in yellow. And that's where we're going to be talking about. So many of those areas have easy access through the roads, but areas depicted in red, or it might look like orange. So those are areas they're so remote that they get really tough to hunt in a day trip. And they represent about a third of our public hunting unit by area. And they often have some of the best hunting. And there is a handful of existing campsites, which I'll cover shortly. And if you're wondering about the gaps on the map, Kauai has a lot of cliffs, and so I chose to cut those out. And I think it'd help if I give you a rundown of what a typical day hunt to those red areas is like. And so, a lot of you are hunters. Hopefully it's all hunters watching this. A lot of you are hunters, so this may be familiar with you. So let's use Kauai's Alakai as an example, unit E1 or E2, either one. So the best hunting on Kauai is on the west side of the island around Kokee, and the bulk of our population lives on the east side or even further. And so if you live on the east side like me, like we may get up at 3 a.m., drive for 2 hours to the trailhead, part of which is down a long four-wheel drive road, which adds a whole nother limiting factor. Like I don't even have four-wheel drive, so I got to rely on my friends. So let's say we start hunting at first light. By the time we reach the red areas, like it might be nearly midday, and we miss the prime hunting time when the animals are out. And at this point, like most people turn back, but if you're hard-headed like me and you don't want to leave the best hunting grounds, let's say you stay out till late afternoon, and let's say you shoot a pig or a deer, like you may get back to your truck certainly in the dark, maybe after 10 p.m., and be home after midnight, battered, bruised, and nearly fallen asleep at the wheel. And I've done this far too many times. And young hunters can do this a little more often. But as people get older, like I find it harder and harder to get my friends to go back for more. Like it's just too hard on the hunter. And it can be a little dangerous, or at least the driving part. And it's not the kind of experience which people come back for over and over again. And I'll compare this to how I grew up hunting out the Nepali coast along the Kalalau Trail. After school, we would drive to the trailhead. We'd start hiking in, and we'd camp at the Hanako shelter 6 miles in, where we'd set up a base camp. It's a 5-hour hike, but we wouldn't have to carry our gear any further. The next day, we'd wake up. We're already in the best hunting grounds, and we'd hunt the whole next day, sunrise to sunset, in the prime grounds. Any meat you any meat could be hung overnight to cool. The next morning, maybe we do a quick hunt again, and then we would take our time hiking out. And it was a wonderful time. It was not too hard on the body, and it was very repeatable. And I did this dozens of times and you can see young and old people alike. And so these are the types of opportunities I'm hoping we can set up more of for the next generation to enjoy. So when I started out my career in conservation 18 years ago, my boss at the time, Trey Menard, like he turned me on to this idea of hunter shelters. And Trey's a conservationist, and the conservationists are always concerned about animal numbers. And so for Trey, it was a way to help out the native forest in areas which like maybe they were adjacent to their proposed fences, but there are areas where they didn't have any plans to ever fence. And it might even be a cheaper alternative to fencing. And I think he was influenced by talking to hunters like Billy DeCosta, who is a well-known Kauai hunter, now county council member. And they discussed the idea of like rather than fencing, they could try to attract enough hunters to these remote areas by, as they called it, improving the hunting experience with comfortable yet simple shelters, perhaps with smokehouses. And so going off some of their designs and also some of my own, here's a couple sketches of simple tin roof shelters with raised decks to keep hunters out of the dirt and mud. You got a covered post for skinning animals and hanging meat. And many sites are near streams, but if they're not, they could use water catchment. And I added 3 walls to help block the wind, plus a countertop. And so here's some examples of existing shelters. This is the Lonomea campsite on Kauai with its brick-lined fireplace. It's a legal campsite on the permit system, open to everybody. It's a very popular hiking destination. But it's got a dirt floor, which it's low maintenance, but it gets very dusty and muddy. It's a shelter along the Mulivai Trail on Hawaii Island. It's larger than what I'm proposing, but it does have an example of a raised deck, 3 walls, and a countertop. Moho cabin on Oahu, within the Ko'olau Mountains. I think that's Moho. But simpler is better. We don't need much. And here's an example of water catchment in the Mokihana Ridge Game Management Area. And this is highly valued by hunters in the area. Like it is so nice to have a water source when you're on that hot, dry ridge. And not just people, but also for like hunting dogs and horses. There's a horseback hunting culture out there in the canyon. Couple more slides. This is the Kauai shelter in the Alakai of Kauai, Unit E2. It's a 4 mile hike, no camping currently allowed, and there's a beautiful stream next to it, beautiful forest, and there are pigs and deer throughout that forest. And I don't know if y'all have heard of the New Zealand hut system, but like they have hundreds of these all over their country, and many trails have one about every 2 miles. Like you can just camp from hut to hut. And so that helps cover the who, what, and why. But in terms of where, I made more maps. So light green areas are areas which are easily accessible within a day hunt from a road. And then red represents the more remote regions, which are best hunted with overnight camping. Hashed areas are landlocked. Black is the watershed fences, in which part of the reason for the fencing was because it was felt that not enough hunters were going out there to help keep the animals in check. I'll flip back and forth so you can see what I'm talking about. And on a brighter note, Kauai does currently have a small network of campsites open to the public, such as that's those green dots, such as portions of Waimea Canyon, the Kalalau Trail, Waialae Cabin, Kokee, Suki Grove, Milili'i, etc. But they aren't necessarily in prime hunting destinations, and you can see a lot of areas still without any legal campsites nearby. And hunters do go to those places and camp there, just illegally. And so they can't participate in the checking station data. They can't contribute to the camping permit revenues. And my whole thing is like hunters shouldn't have to break the law to camp there. Like there should be legal ways. And if it were up to me, we'd have a network of campsites all over the island, or even throughout the state for that matter. Similar to that New Zealand hut system. But if we have to prioritize, these are some low-hanging fruit. So these orange dots are some of the places where they already have existing shelters, and I felt like they could be easily upgraded and added to the camping permit system. And I'm going to focus on one proposed campsite, which could be a priority. and that is an existing picnic shelter located in a more remote portion of hunting unit H. It's in one of the most popular hunting units on the island. It gets about 1,500 hunting trips annually on the check-in sheets. But out of those, very few hunters make it out this far due to remoteness. Some photos of it in the area. This shelter is located along the top rim of the Nepali coast. Access is through existing trail systems, which are maintained by the state. It's a little under 3 miles, but downhill about 1,700 feet in elevation, so it's a bit of a trek, at least coming back uphill. This shelter might need to be upgraded with water catchment and a composting toilet to make it into a quality campsite. I shouldn't say might need it. It probably needs that. It's near the boundary of the Kauai Natural Area Reserve, the Kauai Nar, and so I'm sure the conservationists would love for there to be more hunting effort way out there. It's got a lot of pigs. The surrounding area has good pig and deer hunting year-round, plus goats near the cliffy portions below. And it's a good staging ground to hunt the area even further downhill, which not too many people make it out to anymore. In talking to other hunters, most really like the idea. And then you get some interesting remarks from some people. Like some are just cynical remarks about the state. But the one main one I get is that like hunters really don't want hikers attracted out into their hunting grounds. And so I don't know if this camping could be limited to hunters somehow. Like DOFA people I've talked to seem to think it's best to be on the permit system open to everybody. And I guess I might argue too, like maybe the best hunting destinations are not necessarily going to be popular hiking destinations, so maybe it's not so much something to worry about. Um, as far as what DOFA thinks, we haven't really progressed past the discussion phase, but we did get a draft map of proposed campsites placed on that Kauai Forest user web map for hunters to view. Kauai DOFA is generally supportive, especially since I organized this presentation. But I know they're busy. I know they're busy, and there is a backlog of maintenance on existing shelters, and so there's some hesitancy to add more at this time. You know, everyone wants to talk about making things, but they got to be maintained. I'm told that the camping permit revenues are not that significant, and that they also have to be split with other departments. And so I've been trying to go about this in a way that doesn't add to the state's plate. I don't think it'd be hard to get funding and construct these with volunteer effort. There's plenty of people with carpentry experience. What I'm realizing is that the biggest hurdle is it's not funding or even getting the go-ahead from the state. The biggest hurdle is actually maintenance. And so we're gonna have to figure that one out. But I've been going down this path of thinking it would have to be on the camping reservation system open to everybody, which is something not popular with hunters. And that may make sense for areas which are along the Na'alahele trails, such as that example I just gave of that picnic shelter. But I realize it wouldn't make sense for any of those proposed sites which are not near any hiking trails. And maybe permits could be allowed strictly to hunters through a different platform, such as that same Go Hunt Hawaii system, which currently sells us hunting permits. And maybe it doesn't even need to be complicated at all. Like maybe hunters can just go to some of these places, some of these shelters for free on a first come, first served basis. And so, it seems there's no one size fits all. There's a lot of stakeholders in the forest, and it's going to have to be a team effort. And if there's enough will, hopefully we can find a way. So mahalo to everybody who has supported this idea, and I hope this drives some discussion. And so that's Kauai. And I was wondering if the other GMAC members or anybody watching this has places on their own islands which they'd like to have shelters for hunters to camp at. And maybe this could be a statewide initiative to give something positive back to the hunting community. And with that, any questions, comments, concerns? This is a YouTube video, so feel free to write them in the comments section, or if you like, feel free to call me, direct message me, either here or Instagram or Facebook. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people. All right, y'all have a good day.